you're constantly being made an example of. Wait, hold on. This just seems like the natural progression of what happens after you quietly quit.
Mm-hmm.
This is you're going to be quietly fired.
And you're listening to the Brown Perspective. This is Eduardo, and I'm joined by the millennial who invented quiet quitting, RO.
Hey, how we doing?
Good, man. I'm glad you haven't quiet quitted our podcast yet.
Right? I just learned about that 2 weeks ago. I didn't even know it was a thing.
I'm
Quite,
still learning about it.
and also now there's something called quiet firing,
Say
quiet
what?
firing. So let's see if we can define or if we can discuss both of them. I think it's pretty interesting. Even quiet quitting, because I when I heard about it about 2 weeks ago, someone on Twitter posted that there's no such thing, that
Yeah.
if that he goes to work and he does basically what he's paid to do, and if he's supposed to go above and beyond, then the employer should be compensating them for that. That there's nothing wrong with, at least that's what the argument that he was trying to make, that it's just people trying to frame it differently. Like if you're supposed to work your ass off at work, when in reality it's the employer that's supposed to motivate you to work.
Well, that or the work itself, right? And I know that and I don't know if it was related to the quiet quitting phenomenon, but I know that one of the skits that I saw recently was from Chris Rock talking about the difference between having a job and a career. And I do feel that, yeah, I mean, some people prefer to have the 9 to 5 job where you can work as hard as you need to at the work and then have the opportunity to disconnect and do something completely different afterwards. And then there's people who are certainly thinking about their work or their business 24/7 and they have a real passion for getting things done. But to your point, I think from what I gather about quiet quitting, is not really about quitting. It's more about saying, okay, no, I'm not going to go above and beyond. I'm just going to do my job. And then I'm going to have some boundaries and some balance in my life and in my work. Right.
Which, right, which when you say it like that, it sounds reasonable. But I think the discourse, especially at least on Twitter, is that it's just individuals that have checked out from work and are doing the bare minimum just because they either they don't enjoy their job or they're not getting paid enough. Or at least if you go to the extreme, the conservatives will say that it's just lazy, entitled millennials that don't want to work. So it really depends on who you're talking to. But what I think, it comes down to incentives. And no matter which way you describe it, it all also bubbles up to a failure of management. Because if you have an individual that has decided to do the bare minimum, then management is not providing the right incentives for that individual to feel motivated, to feel like he or she is part of the team, that they have a vested interest in the success of the company. And of
Mhm.
course that's going to change from job to job. There's a huge difference between, say, a profession like a nurse or a doctor or an engineer versus someone that's flipping burgers, right? The professions have equity. That you get equity, you get bonus, you get other incentives. If you're just flipping burgers, what kind of incentives is the manager giving you? But even if you say, well, look, the manager is fine, so they didn't do the right incentives. So, but if people want to say, there's also people that no matter what kind of incentives you give them, there's just people that are naturally lazy. Because again, that's the conservative talking point. Oh yeah, these people are entitled, they're lazy, they just don't want to work. Well, that's a failure of management too. Because if you have individuals like that, then you need to get rid of them. And if you don't have a way of measuring your productive individuals from those that are not productive, and that's a failure of management as well. So it always it comes down to the management. So it's interesting that on Twitter the conversation is like, at least maybe my feed is leans more conservative when it comes to this, but the sentiment is that, oh, look at these individuals so entitled that they're quietly quitting, as opposed to putting the focus on the employers.
Yeah, I agree. I think I agree with what you're saying. I also think there's the responsibility on the part of the employee, both I think for myself as an employee too, to think about if I'm not motivated, like how do I address the situation? Is it the work that I'm doing? Is it, and to your point, the incentives? And I do agree with you that that's one of the more powerful things that motivates human behavior. So having those incentives. And I think we also have to acknowledge that we just went through this pandemic experience of working remotely, of working from home when we have a lot of other things going on. And I consider myself one of the lucky people who, you know, we don't have kids, we do have pets, but for the most part, it wasn't the type of chaos that I know other people had to face at home or with other people in their households and things like that. So I know that there was also just the natural distractions that come from working at home. But to your point, it's also if you are motivated to do the work that you need to do and then take care of the things that you need to take care, as long as that's happening,
Hmm.
I think for the most part, people should be fine. And as long as you're delivering on what you need to deliver, that's great. So I know that there's that part of the reason why I know there was the great reset or the great resignation of people deciding to say, you know what, this is not for me. I'm going to find another work, or I'm going to find something that's better aligned with what I want to do for whatever reasons, right? For personal or professional reasons.
Right. But what you described there as the individual that's taking care of making sure that their tasks are complete and they're taking care of their assignments, that doesn't sound like, when I hear of quiet quitting, that doesn't sound like a person that would be quietly quitting. That just sounds like a responsible person
Yeah.
that's taking care of their. But then I suppose it's hard to say, how do you draw a line between someone just doing their job and someone doing the bare minimum. I suppose that's going to come down to the quality of the work that you're doing.
Yeah, I mean the quality and also the timing, right? And sometimes the response times.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of it, to your point, it is about management establishing that communication to be able to say, okay, I this is what I've noticed. Is there something going on, right? Is it, if you have something going on at a house, that's great. Just let me know and I can be understanding. But if you're not communicating both ways, or if as a boss, you know that something is a priority and you haven't communicated that, okay, this is something that needs to get done. Can you get it done? And if not, let me know so I can figure out a plan B.
Yeah. You
Then
know,
that's also, but I think there's also the expectations and balancing the expectations, that managing and having the clear expectations between the employer and the employee.
mm-hmm.
So is the expectation that you're going to be checking email or text after a certain time or in the weekend. So I think understanding what's expected of you and being able to communicate whether or not that works for you. And to your point, but from the employee perspective and from the manager's perspective.
Yeah, and also there's another angle to this. And before people out there start getting any ideas about quiet quitting or about quietly quitting, just remember that the expectations change based on whether you're white, Latino, or black. And
Mm.
so there's always it seems more pressure on Latinos and African Americans to prove themselves because they don't always get the benefit of the doubt. And if you say, if someone perceives that you're slacking off, they might be less forgiving towards you because of those stereotypes that are already ingrained.
Yeah, it could be because you're right. I think there's a certain proving of yourself, particularly at the beginning of your career. And I think it also gender plays into it as well. And and I do, to one of the biggest issues, right? You're not given that same grace or space to make a mistake, to fail, or to
You
have a
know,
bad day, right? Or a bad week
it
or
always
a
comes
bad
back.
moment.
It always comes back to the black quarterbacks.
Exactly. Everything in life as we start the new NFL season today, this week, which I feel a little ambivalent about. Um, yes, it all comes back to the black quarterbacks in football.
And
A metaphor for life.
yeah, for anyone that hasn't heard our previous discussions on this, black quarterbacks get very few chances, and if they're not starting, they get very even fewer chances as second stringers or third stringers. They're not kept around, and for whatever reason, then that's just the way it is.
Well, we know the reason,
Well, sure,
or some of the main reasons,
right,
and again, it maybe is expectations, assumptions about the the players' quality and ability to contribute to the team or to step up in the situation, and not thinking about some of the other ways that maybe they contribute to the team and getting it done,
yeah,
and having this very model, right? So right now, I know Wilson just moved from the Seattle Seahawks to the Broncos, and I know there's a lot of expectations on him.
yeah. I'm rooting for
Uh,
him. I hope that he does well. Not a big
yeah.
Seahawks fan, being a 49ers fan, but still, I do. I'm rooting for him. Now, let's cover quickly the quiet firing as well, because I hadn't heard about this one. So this one says your manager constantly picks and criticizes your work. You've had no raises, promotions, or even chats about these things. Your one-to-one meetings are ignored or constantly canceled. You're constantly being made an example of. Wait, hold on. This just seems like the natural progression of what happens after you quietly quit.
Hmm.
This is you're going to be quietly fired.
And not so quietly, right? Because I they seems to be pretty significant
Well, it's so
actions and things. I mean, criticizing your work, and I wonder if it's criticizing your work
yeah, but this
in
is
public or
but this
just
is
to
this is
provide your
this is
feedback.
like I know, but this is overt. Like it's out in the open, but you didn't get fired technically,
Hmm.
but you've been quietly fired. I don't think because these things are happening out in the open, like your manager constantly picking on you, he hasn't fired you, but he's already maybe quietly fired you, and these are the repercussions of the manager coming to that conclusion.
Un manager tóxico.
And so, yeah, like you said earlier, maybe they're just making up terms at this point because it seems like this has always happened. You
Yeah,
know,
it's interesting because obviously there's a lot of for the most part, I mean, there's a work culture, and I think one of the reasons, and I have to admit, I've only seen some episodes here and there, but I know The Office seemed to capture a lot of the quirky
yeah,
work dynamics, obviously, and taking it to a next level.
yeah,
But I know there's some of the instances that you highlighted. Sometimes like, oh yeah, I can't believe that happened, and
yeah. Why do they have to put a Latino that's been quietly fired?
exactly.
So either way, no matter what you want to call it, no matter whether conservatives think that it's the individual's fault or if it comes down to management, it doesn't matter. What matters is that it will affect the productivity of the nation as a whole if these things are happening. And you want to compare us to a country like China, where in one of the free economic zones in Shenzhen, China, which is it's many consider it to be the Silicon Valley of China. I forget, someone wrote a book about it where they spend a lot of time with the entrepreneurs in Shenzhen, and they compare them to what Palo Alto is now, and they were just like, yeah, there's just no way, man. We're not competing with these guys. We're not competing with China because just the way they're working around the clock over there,
Mm.
with startups, with everything, the work ethic, it's just compared to America, it's like it's on a whole different level. It's like they're hungrier and more ambitious. So if you have this dynamic happening in the U.S. where just people are not motivated and you have either bad management or maybe it is a reflection of the millennial culture, I don't know, entitled generation, as people want to put it, right? I don't know, but whatever the cause is, it is going to affect the productivity of this nation, and ultimately we could fall behind to other more ambitious, hungrier countries that are now coming up with the type of work ethic that you probably would have seen in previous decades or generations in the U.S.
Yeah, but isn't precisely that what some people want, sort of a change in the model and maybe not being as capitalistic? Because in some ways, it's interesting that when you compare the work ethic of the US to China, but also of the US to Europe, I know that Europeans, they have a lot, they have a better balance of life, more opportunity to take time off. And yes, obviously productivity is going to be hurt, but when you think about probably mental health, physical health, the being able to be more creative at work are also things that need to be considered. So you're right. I think that China and other countries are trying to or working to catch up, but at the same time, the more the capitalist model is part of what has driven the U.S. success and that work ethic that we have of barely taking as much time off and taking care of ourselves or paying for things like paid family leave if you need to take care of a loved one who needs additional help.
Well, and therein lies the irony in what you're pointing out, in that if this is a pushback or a natural reaction to decades or centuries at this point of the capitalist work ethic, then it still doesn't change the fact that other countries will catch up. So in a sense, it was the ambition, the type of work ethic that built this nation, and now the people, because of all the wealth that's been generated, because of the quality of life, people are in a position where they can push back on it and say, no, we don't want to do this anymore because we are beyond that. We're at a point in this society where we're so developed that we need to slow down a bit and enjoy our vacation and enjoy ourselves and enjoy our relationships and all of that. But I think the Batman movie with Bane captures it well when Batman goes into retirement and then he tries to face Bane. And I saw this on Twitter. Somebody mentioned this. It's not my original idea, so I don't want to take credit for it. Or
Good. Give credit what credit is due.
yeah, somebody. But they pointed this out that when Bane defeats Batman, he breaks his back. Le dice, "Victory has defeated you." Because that's what happened, right? Batman won all the battles. He defeated the Joker, and then he just retired for a bit. And when he retired, he got a little fatter. He wasn't working out, and he fell behind. And a more aggressive, hungrier opponent came along and defeated him. And I didn't even know that's the line that he had said. It didn't register at the time, so somebody on Twitter pointed it out, and I thought that was pretty good. So that's what's happening here.
Yes, and I think, but there's also there's a balance, right? You don't need to like look like Batman and have a six pack and things like that, but you also don't allow yourself to lose it
Well, it
completely, right?
depends on the opponent.
That's true on the opponent, but again, why? And I know competition economically, species. I mean, that's what I think in some ways is in competitions in this sense is good because it is about, and going back to football, right? The competition of being better than the next person, that the other team doing things better. That competition, that incentive is very important. But I know that there's a difference between, uh, you know, working to live and living to work, because that's the way that sometimes it describes the work ethic between here and the US and maybe Latin America and Europe, where we say that aquí viven para trabajar
Hmm.
y allá se trabaja para vivir, right? So there's a difference also around the motivation and what's the focus of your of your life, right? What brings you joy and it may be being the best tech entrepreneur, or maybe just having the right balance so that you can go to the gym, work out, spend time with your family, and do the things that bring you joy.
Yeah, no, very well said. I agree with that. There's definitely a balance. I'm not arguing for people not trying to take it easy, not enjoying their vacation. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the reality of it is that if we do go in that direction, which is good for us on a personal level for Americans, the reality is that we will fall behind in terms of productivity to other nations. But I also think that's okay because I think we benefit from other countries being as strong as the U.S. So you have a natural check there against U.S. power. So checks and balances the same way we have in our government. So yeah,
So maybe we'll get to an equilibrium at some point.
yeah. So that would be good. So all right, I think we can wrap it up here unless you have any other words on quietly quitting and quietly firing someone.
Are you quitting on me, Herreo? Don't quit on me. I need you to do a few more extra minutes of this podcast.
Yeah, no, I'd let you know. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't just do it quietly. All right.
Oh, cool.
If you all out there enjoy our content, make sure to check us out. We are Brown Perspective.
Ciao.